Great. Firstly, I want to thank you all for coming and attending this session. My name is Anand Subaraj. I'm the Group Product Manager of Azure Data Factory. I have with me Gaurav Malhotra, Principal Product Manager of Azure Data Factory. And we are super excited to talk to you about some of the latest and greatest innovations in Azure Data Factory. In this session, we are going to talk about some of the latest and greatest capabilities that we have introduced recently, and also talk about the customer scenarios and how customers are leveraging Azure Data Factory, especially the new capabilities, to build their analytics solution. But before that, let's do a quick fact check. How many of you are familiar with Azure Data Factory? Great. How many of you are using Azure Data Factory in a solution? Great to see those hands. For those of you who are not familiar with Azure Data Factory, just to do a recap, Azure Data Factory is the best cloud-native data integration platform in the planet today, offering code-free ETL and ELT capabilities. There are 4 key pillars of Azure Data Factory that you see here. Number 1, data movement and transformation at scale. Data movement continues to be a very serious focus area for us. We are offering 90+ connectors, and new connectors are getting added every month. With some of the latest and greatest capabilities that we have announced, now Azure Data Factory offers code-free visual transformation at scale. Number 2, hybrid pipeline model. We enable organizations to create hybrid data pipelines across on-premises and cloud environments. Author and monitor, this is an area where we are investing heavily. We enable organizations to create these pipelines visually, code-free, and for those organizations that have coders, they can use our programmatic surface area to build and deploy, monitor these pipelines. SSIS package execution, we enable organizations to lift and shift SQL Server integration services into Azure in full compatibility. Azure Data Factory V2 was announced about 12 months back, and it has been extremely successful. There are 10 million+ data factories created in the last 12 months, close to 1 billion activity executions every month, and some of our largest customers are moving petabyte scale data every week. I want to take a pause and thank you all for your help in making this happen. Thank you. We have been working with a lot of customers, and we have learned a lot about the different scenarios and use cases. We categorize the scenarios into 3 different patterns, starting with what we call as modern data warehouse. You may have already seen different versions of this slide, different flavors, but the idea here is that organizations have data all over the place. Data can be on-premises, data can be in cloud, there can be data from SaaS applications, and so forth. We want to enable organizations to connect to all these different data stores, land the data into a long-term storage or the data lake, and once the data appears in the lake, you want to prepare, transform, enrich, predict, and serve for rich enterprise analytics. ADF is used here for data ingestion, data preparation, transformation, and serving it into the serving layer for the analytics. Not just that, ADF also enables orchestration and operationalization of this end-to-end pipeline from data ingestion all the way to data delivery. The next pattern is very similar to the previous pattern. We are working with a lot of ISVs who use Data Factory to power their analytics applications, to build smart intelligent apps. And the smart intelligent apps, it has a data tier which follows exactly the same pattern of data ingestion, data preparation, transformation, and delivery to the serving layer. But here, the serving layer is for improving the intelligence of the application. Now, in both these patterns that you saw, organizations have to stitch together all these services to create the analytics solution. With Azure Synapse Analytics that we recently announced a couple of days back, you may have already seen a lot of communication, a lot of messages around that, a lot of announcements on that. With Azure Synapse Analytics, this is the evolution of SQL Data Warehouse that blends together data integration big data analytics, and DW into a single end-to-end service for cloud scale analytics. Simply put, it enables organizations to create these end-to-end solutions in a more productive manner for faster time to solution. For the rest of the talk today, we wanted to use a particular customer scenario, in this case, retail omnichannel customer engagement, to discuss how organizations would build this particular solution on Azure Data Factory. The retail omnichannel customer engagement follows the typical pattern of modern data warehouse, where organizations need to connect to various different data sources, whether it's on-premises, cloud, point of sale, in-store, bring that all into a lake, prepare, transform, perform predictions to provide the best customer experience across any point of interactions. I'm going to talk about the building blocks and the capabilities. Then Gaurav is going to come over and show a demo of how to build this particular solution using Azure Data Factory. The first step usually in such an analytic solution is to ingest data from all these various places that I mentioned and load the lake. With ADF, we offer 90+ connectors, and as I said, new connectors are getting added every month. We have 24 points of presence globally, and with self-hosted integration runtime, you can connect to an on-premises environment or an environment that is behind a firewall. Some of the largest customers are using ADF to move petabyte scale data every week. Few years back, this was not possible. The only way for customers to ingest that volume of data into Azure was shipping disks. Now, using Azure Data Factory, organizations can move petabyte scale data using a very simple experience in an unprecedented scale and throughput. Once that data is loaded, as I mentioned, the next step is to prepare and transform the data in the lake. We announced data flows recently. Mapping data flows is generally available. It got generally available a month back. And a couple of days back, we announced wrangling data flow in public preview. Both mapping data flow and wrangling data flows enables organization to prepare and transform data visually, code-free, at scale. We manage the entire code, entire infrastructure, and run it on a scaled-out manner on a Spark distribution. But from an organization's perspective, the Spark distribution is completely abstracted, and we manage the entire infrastructure and hide that completely from the user. Not just that, it enables a longer shelf life for the work that is done. Now, once the transformation happens, the next step, usually in a solution for an app, is to perform prediction. And for predictive analytics, we have announced Azure Machine Learning integration just a month back. And with Azure Machine Learning integration, we enable organizations to perform batch scoring, retraining from within the data integration solution at scale. With machine learning pipelines, you can deploy the machine learning model, you can train the model, and from within Azure Data Factory with the machine learning activity, you can integrate that with the rest of the pipeline in a fully managed environment, code-free visually. And this is integrated with the rest of the ADF infrastructure, rest of the ADF ecosystem, where you can leverage the 90+ connectors, you can leverage the rich monitoring experience, and seamlessly blend this within your pipelines. The next step is to load this data into DW. Azure Factory is integrated with Azure Synapse Analytics, formerly SQL DW. We offer best-in-class integration with Azure Synapse Analytics. We leverage Polybase to load the data at scale, support common loading patterns like insert, update, delete, and also create tables if the tables are not already existing. Now that I have built all these components, the next step is to operationalize and orchestrate the pipeline at scale. How many of you are familiar with Airflow? Airflow or NiFi is some of the best open source data orchestrator out there. ADF offers the exact same capabilities at scale in a fully managed environment. We offer the best-in-class orchestration and operationalization capabilities for data-driven pipelines. Now, once you have orchestrated the pipeline, the next step usually is to monitor and manage this pipeline. ADF offers rich capabilities for monitoring and managing these pipelines. We have native integrated experience for monitoring and managing these end-to-end pipelines that you have created, and also offer integration with Azure Monitor for events, diagnostics, and alerts. Not just that, we have also recently added a bunch of capabilities that enables organizations to manage these entire pipelines and perform restatements of activity runs and pipeline runs. We have also announced Gantt views that enables organizations to view the entire execution map of the activities at scale. I'm saying a lot of things that we have recently announced, but we have done a lot of work in the last 12 months. This is the next thing that we have announced, which is Azure Data Factory templates. With templates, you have best-in-class patterns and best practices available as Azure Data Factory templates that you can deploy to improve productivity on a day zero scenario. Do not have to start on a blank canvas, but leverage these templates and build these pipelines quickly and easily. At this point in time, it is Microsoft-offered templates. Over the course of time, we are going to enable organizations to publish their templates and also enable third-party organizations to build and publish these templates. Once all these pipelines are built, deployed, operationalized, monitored, and managed, you can leverage the insights in Power BI. Now let's get into the demo. I invite Gaurav to the stage to show how you can build this pipeline, operationalize, manage, and monitor.
Thank you, Anand. So I'm just going to switch to my computer. And so here I'm basically starting from Azure Portal, which is one-stop shop for building all your Azure data services. And I've provisioned a data factory over here. So just in the interest of time, it's just like every other Azure service. You can find it into new service, provision a data factory, and you will land into a blade like this. And once you do that, you provision one, you click author and monitor, and it launches our modern web-based UX, which allows you to do code-free ETL with simple drag and drop gestures. Now here, this is our overview page. So you can see that we have some quick actions for you to get started. Some videos on you to listen to different features that we keep on announcing every week, and some tutorials for you to get started. So for this demo, where we are trying to show the retail omnichannel customer experience engagement end-to-end, I already have a pipeline built, but basically you can click Create Pipeline, and it takes you to our authoring canvas. We call this as the Author tab. You can see this is our Resource Explorer. As you can see, I do a bunch of demos, so I have a bunch of folders with demos. This is our activity toolbox, and the way it is organized is activity runs on which service. So you can see that we have Azure Data Explorer, we have Azure Function, you can write custom code and run it over Azure Batch Pools, the entire Databricks family, some common general functions like stored procedure, lookup activities, variable activities. You can bring your own compute and use our web activity to call an HTTP endpoint, both in a synchronous or an asynchronous way. The entire HD Insight family and iterations and conditionals where you're trying to do looping infrastructure, if else, and the machine learning integration that Anand just talked about. So it's as simple as just dragging and dropping an activity onto the canvas. So you can just drag an activity onto the canvas. You can keep on adding more activities, connect on success, do something on failure. And the beauty here is that we have built this with iterative development and debugging in mind. So you can always build your representative workflow, click validate, and we'll tell you exactly what is absolutely required for this particular workflow to run. All of these are clickable links. It will take you exactly to the location what requires to be filled. And as you keep on filling those, these will keep on turning green. And once it's a valid pipeline, you can publish and start to do debugging on it and all of it. So let's just switch to the pipeline that I already have built for this demo. So as Anand mentioned, the first step for this is to ingest data into the lake. So here I have an ingest pipeline where you can see that I'm trying to ingest data from an HTTP location. I have some data, customer data in my Dynamics, products data in SAP, point of sale data in SQL Server, and clickstream data in Amazon S3. So here you can add from any of the 90 plus connectors that we support out of the box. So you can see that you just click plus new data set and all the 90 plus are available for you. And the beauty here is that you can just click and provide your source and destination, the entire infrastructure to do the data movement, scaling it up and down, all is handled by Data Factory in a managed way. So this is truly serverless from that aspect. And here we do support Azure connectors, other clouds, like you can pull data from Redshift, Amazon S3, GCP. So all of those connectors are available out of the box. NoSQL connectors like Cassandra, MongoDB. So it's all simple clicks. And like Anand mentioned, we are actually one of the only hyperscale cloud providers that provide such a connectivity, and we do not charge you on a connector basis. So our pricing model is not based on how many connectors you use in your pipelines, but totally based on how many executions you do. So this all infrastructure from a connectivity standpoint is managed by us. So once you have build these data ingestion pipeline, as I mentioned, so if I take a look at show you one of those, so you just have to define your source. So in this case, as I mentioned, I have my customers in Dynamics, and I can click edit, and it opens up this Dynamics data set. So I've defined my Dynamics connection. So this is just basically linked to connection string to my Dynamics account, and you can choose to provide your password and store it safely with us, or you can store everything in Key Vault. So totally up to you. Our suggestion to customers is to essentially keep all your secrets in one place in Key Vault. And we never store that in our service, because once you are running a pipeline, we would just dynamically load in memory at that time and discard it. So it will never get persisted to disk. So very secure from that standpoint. So once you have defined your connection, you can do test connections just to make sure everything is working from a connection standpoint end to end. And here I've just provided my entity name. So we automatically list all the entities that you have access to. If you want to provide one with just your name, which maybe become existent from an upstream application, you could just click edit and provide a name for that as well. And here once I've provided the connection, I've provided my schema, and we can automatically import schema from your data set. So we have APIs which can go detect schema and automatically push this into the Data Factory data set. And once you do that, then if I go back to the pipeline, you can see that here I'm using a simple query to pull all the data from my Dynamics. And my sink is a data set, a lake data set, which I have defined again in the same manner. And in the similar way, I have defined it for other connectors as well. Now, one thing I want to point out over here is that the biggest thing Data Factory supports is parameterization, which means that you can parameterize the crap out of it. So every property here is parameterizable. And it's a very innovative thing in the sense that imagine that you have your data in Amazon S3, and it is partitioned by date, year, month, and date. Now, what you can do is you can just parameterize your data set to say that I'm going to use the rich expression language that Data Factory supports. So if I were to just show you how that is, so here in my source data set for Amazon S3, you can see that I've parameterized my file path. And here you can use the datetime functions to craft that partition. So let's say every day when the pipeline runs, the Data Factory trigger is going to resolve to that day, look for data in that partition, and copy it over to the lake. Now, there's absolutely no coding required from your side. All of that is handled natively by Data Factory as a service. So this is very cool because we had customers who had to write a bunch of code to take care of that, or they were completely moving the entire data every time into the lake and then trying to filter it out in the lake. But with this, you don't have to do it. If your data is partitioned, you just use your expression language, and only that partition gets loaded and can be used for downstream analytics. And like I said, in this case, I chose to parameterize this, but every property here is parameterizable. So you can see that as I tab into different properties, this add dynamic content comes, and you can parameterize it. So not only you can parameterize your data sets, but imagine you have a SQL server, and in that SQL server you had 100 databases from which you want to pull the data. So you don't have to define 100 connections corresponding to each database. You can just define a single connection, what we call as a link service in Data Factory, parameterize your database name, and that database name value could be filled from a lookup activity, which is essentially querying, let's say, a CSV file or another table which has a list of all the databases that you have, and then use that input to go over all, let's say you're trying to copy data from all those databases and go forward from there. So again, parameterization is key, and you can see that it flows from the pipeline to data sets to connections all the way down. So we have created our ingest pipeline. So the next step is to prep and transform the data. So I have a prep pipeline over here, and this is using the newly added capability that we announced earlier this week, which we call as the wrangling data flow. It's in public preview, and the way to add this is very simple. When you click a plus new data flow, we have two types of data flow, as Anand mentioned. So here I've chosen the wrangling data flow and added that as an activity. And once you double click this, it opens up our wrangling data flow canvas. So this is our integration with Power Query Online. So if you guys have used Power Platform data flows, if you have done pivot and pivot operations in Excel, so behind the scenes, it uses Power Query language, and this is what Power Platform data flows uses as well. So what we have done is we have taken the best-in-class data preparation technology that comes with Power Query and enabled that as a step in your Data Factory pipeline. But the beauty is that once you essentially define, so what happened over here is that all my Data Factory data sets got loaded into this mashup editor, what we call as, and now you're ready to wrangle your data. So you can do row level operations, you can manage columns, you can do column level operations. And as you apply these steps, as you can see on the side, I have merged some data, I have removed columns, I've expanded columns, renamed columns. You can see your data changing iteratively in this grid. We are operating on a sample of data, but once we are done with building the building block for doing data preparation, all you do is come in your pipeline and specify for this particular wrangling data flow activity, what is the integration runtime you want to use. And in that integration runtime, you basically define that whether my workload is going to be compute optimized, memory optimized, and I need 64 cores or 16 cores, and we will automatically take this logic for data preparation that you have defined. And this is basically what we call as the M query, and translate that M query into Spark and run it over big data clusters all in a managed way. So you are not in the cluster management business anymore. We take care of that. We will scale it up and down to give you the best in class performance. So you can just focus on defining that business logic, and we'll do all the heavy lifting for you. So once you have prepped the data, the next step is to transform the data. And here I have this transform pipeline. And here I'm using the mapping data flow capability in Data Factory. Again, the same way you click plus new data flow, and this is the mapping data flow, which allows you to do code-free transformation. And if I double click this, it opens up the data flow canvas. So think of every box here as a transformation that you are trying to run. And you can choose from the list of transformations that are available. So whether you want to do multiple inputs and output transformations like join, split, exist, you want to do schema modifier operations like derived columns, pivot, unpivot, or you want to do row modifier operations, all of those are available out of the box. And again, as Anand mentioned, here as well, you're just focusing on defining your business logic. All the heavy lifting of taking that business logic, translating that to Spark, and running it over big data clusters is handled by us. The scale up and down, all of that is done by us. So here, what I have done is that we are trying to get the sales trends for different transactions that are happening. So you can see that for this one, and we have different customer accounts. So you can see that I'm doing a simple join over here. So if I show you, it's a simple inner join on the account table on the left and the right-hand side. So I have two streams coming in. And you can look at quick previews of the data at every step to see, do sanity checks. know how many inserts happened, how many updates happened, how many columns got dropped. All of that is shown to you with simple clicks. And here what we are trying to do is take care of some data integration patterns out of the box. So let's say you have schema drift happening, meaning you have some data coming in and some new columns got added, and you just want to ignore those columns and continue over with your data integration workflow. All you need to do is come and check in this box, and we will take care of that automatically. Now let's imagine you have some data coming in and you only care about columns that start with C1, for example, and you want to just ignore all the columns. So you can use our expression language again to define that pattern, and we will only take those columns and ignore everything else. So you can essentially come in and add a derived column transformation over here. And then in the derived column transformation, you can just define the expression using our rich expression language. So once this editor loads, it is schema aware. So all my schema would load over here, and I can use all these functions that we have, IntelliSense and all of that built in to help you guide through the process. And our designers did a great job over here to build this editor and essentially provide you all that input to essentially give you the next step on how you can build these expressions and do this code-free data transformation. Now, once you have done these transformations, you've defined your business logic, the next step is for you to load your data into the warehouse. Now, from the data flow, we do support a sync transform. So you can just come in and choose this sync transform. And here I have this DW sync defined where I'm taking the sales trends and loading that into a warehouse. So here, all I have done is defined my SQL DW data set, just like you do for any other activity in Data Factory. And as Anand mentioned earlier, we do support data integration patterns out of the box. So here, if you're trying to do upserts, you're trying to do inserts, you want us to recreate the table every time, you want us to truncate the table, all of that is supported with simple click of a button. You click this enable staging button, we will automatically use the best-in-class Polybase to load your data in a parallel fashion into your DW. So again, those are simple mere clicks, and all that logic behind the scenes is taken care by us for you. And there are certain things that we are doing in the back. So let's say you are trying to do some data into the lake, right? This was a simple example where my transformation was happening in the lake. But for example, let's say your data is coming from S3 and you're trying to load just a plain copy from S3 to DW. Now, if you enable this Polybase button, we are smart enough to understand that if we were to load the data directly from S3 to DW, it won't be fast enough. So we'll take the data from S3, load it into Azure Blob Storage, and then bring it to DW. Now, again, all of those are implementation details from your standpoint, but we do all of that behind the scenes to give you, again, the best-in-class performance. Now here, once I have loaded the data into the warehouse, before I go forward, like one more thing I want to mention here, that here we are trying to give you, again, some, like I mentioned, data integration patterns out of the box. So if you want to come in and you have your data and you want to partition, you want to use different partitioning schemes. So if you have, you want to use single partition, or you want to use round robin based partition or key based partitioning, again, all of those are available with simple clicks. Right now, you have to set it up, but over a period of time, we are going to get smarter. We're going to use machine learning technologies to automatically determine what's the best way to partition your data and use that. But right now, all of those options are available for you to choose if you know that's the best, and set it for your data while you're using these code-free transformations in data flows. Now, once I have prepped and transformed the data and loaded my data into the warehouse, I can see all of this connected together in a single pipeline like this. So you can see that this is a single pipeline, and all of these are configurable layouts. So I'm just going to full screen this to show you this end-to-end. So you can see that I'm ingesting data from these sources. On success, I'm running this wrangling data flow to prep the data. After I have prepped the data, I'm running this mapping data flow to transform the data and load the data into the warehouse. But there's an additional step I'm doing where I'm doing predictive insights with the machine learning integration. So I have data coming in where I know that which sales professional met their target for this year. and I'm using that as a feedback to a machine learning algorithm to come up for the target for next year. So here I have a machine learning pipeline which takes that feedback, calls a machine learning pipeline, and it has an experiment to give me that output. So you just saw that, you just see over here, we just have the machine learning connection defined. I can call that pipeline. I can call the experiment inside that pipeline. I can pass parameters to my machine learning pipeline. And all of that can be done now from a single canvas. So as part of your ETL workflow, not only you're ingesting, prepping, transforming the data, but you're also doing predictive insights with the best-in-class Azure Machine Learning Service. Now, once you have done this, you're ready to essentially debug your pipeline. So you can put breakpoints and say that I just want to run this particular pipeline. So you can just put a breakpoint for this, and you can say debug. And at that point, it will go ahead and kick a test run to essentially say that whether this is going to run fine or not. And as I mentioned earlier, in this case, I've parameterized my Amazon S3 data set. So I've parameterized what is my bucket location, what is my file name, what is the start time from which I want to start getting data. So, and I have some defaults defined for it. And you can change these defaults while you're debugging your pipeline. So if I click finish, it's going to do a debug run. It's going to open up the output tab and show you all these data movement activities in action live. So you can come over here and essentially look at this and see the action in progress. So this was a very small copy because I'm just doing a debug run, so I'm pointing to test folders. But you can see over here that you can look at how much data got read, how much data got written, different throughput, how much time the request was in queue, how much time it took for the request, for the actual transfer to happen. So all of that is presented to you on this single canvas, and this is a real-time information. So if your copy would be in progress, you can refresh in real time to get the latest statistics for your ingestion that's happening. Now, in this particular case, one thing I want to mention is that here I chose to ingest the data, prep and transform using code-free capabilities. But Data Factory as a service is a platform. So if you are a person who still likes to write their notebook and they want to write their notebooks in Databricks or in future in Synapse Analytics, all of that is possible with Data Factory as well. So here I have the exact same pipeline. But instead of using the wrangling and mapping data flow, I decided to do prep and transform using the notebook activity that runs directly on Azure Databricks. So again, it's totally up to you whether you want to do code-free, or in this case, I wrote 1,200 lines of code in my notebook to do the exact same thing. So totally a choice as a customer that you have, but Data Factory enables both those capabilities for you. As Anand mentioned, we do have out-of-box templates. So on day 0, when you come in, you just don't have to learn all the aspects. We get you quickly started with these out-of-the-box templates. And we have different categories, whether you're trying to do different copy operations. And here, not only we are providing simple templates like copying from one source to another, but there are certain patterns that we have published. So if you're trying to do incremental copy, if you're trying to bulk load from a database, then we have these different patterns available. And once you click this, all you have to provide is your connection string. And once you do that, the pipelines get automatically created, and you can use those. So here, these are out-of-the-box templates, but the thing that we also provide with Data Factory is you can save your pipeline as a template as well. So if you have something that you've built in your organization and you want to share it with other business units, you can save your pipeline as a template, just share it with your own tenant only, and then we allow that as well. So it's a very cool capability for you to share your stuff across organizations, across business units in your organizations. So like I said, out-of-box templates for different categories, whether you're trying to do copy, you're trying to transform with mapping data flow, you're trying to do prep with wrangling data flow, we do have templates available for each category for you to use out of the box. Now, once you have built this end-to-end pipeline, you have debugged it, and this is something that you want to run this on a cadence or on an event, all you come and do is put a trigger on it. So you come here and say, I want to say new, and you just define your trigger. And here, whether you want to do a scheduled trigger, think of scheduled trigger as wall clock time. So once 9 a.m. hits, it's going to start running. Tumbling window trigger, it's basically, it allows you to go in the past and do backfills as well, so one window at a time. And then event-based triggering, where if your file lands in Azure Blob, if your file lands in, let's say, ADLS Gen 2, or we are working to integrate other sources like Service Bus, Event Hubs, your event grid topics, all of those you'll be able to kick off your pipelines as well. Now, once I do that, I can start to monitor my pipeline. So this is my monitoring tab, and we have what we call as the simple list view for you to look at every pipeline run in action. Or, as Anand mentioned, most of our customers today used these Gantt views. So it's a representation of your pipeline runs, but by a quick peek, you can tell that this S3 to Lake pipeline has been running fine, because if it would not be, a single bar would have failed, or the length of the bar would be bigger than the other one, and you will immediately know that for the last 30 days, this pipeline run had some anomaly, and you can essentially go look at it. And here again, we enable these actions right from here, so you can click this, we'll tell you more information. So you can see over here that we are essentially telling you how much average runtime is, what was the longest duration for all of these runs, shortest duration, the status of it, all of that is presented to you right here. And these are clickable links. So once you click this, we take you to that pipeline run. And now you can look at that pipeline run in action and look at what actual thing it ran with. You can look at each of these activity runs. So if I were to go in the list view and show you this, so for example, for this one, if I go and look at more details, you can see that this particular data flow ran successfully. We tell you how much was the cluster startup time, and behind the scenes, we're using Azure Databricks over here. We tell you information about every single transformation that you have run, and how much columns got added, how much columns got dropped, updated, drifted, partitioning information. So comprehensive monitoring information provided to you out of the box. So you can use this to do end-to-end monitoring for your pipeline, and this is monitoring per data factory. But if you want to monitor across data factory, let's say in your organization you have multiple data factories, then as Anand mentioned, we have integration with Azure Monitor as well. So you can route your metrics from all the factories to a single Azure Monitor account, build a BI dashboard on top of it, and then you can do across the factory monitoring as well. So that's a supported use case with Data Factory. There are some dashboards for you to look at out of the box. You can create alerts on your pipelines, and essentially no one monitors their pipelines like a hummingbird, right? So you just come in and on these different metrics, whether it is a failed or a successful, and you can go as specific as to say if a particular activity in a pipeline A failed, only raise an alert, or you can define a template to say if anything fails in my factory, raise me an alert. We do support that as well. And you can do phone-based alert, you can do email-based alerts. All of that again is supported out of the box with mere clicks. So this was essentially end-to-end on how you can ingest, prep, transform, load your warehouse, do predictive analytics, and ultimately once your data is in DW, you can have a BI dashboard built like this, hooked up to your DW and running on a refresh. So in this case, you can see that I'm providing different insights for my sales analytics onto what opportunity value was by product category, key influencers, what caused us to win a particular customer or lose a customer. And here I can dive deeper to gain additional insights for this key influencer to see that my sales professionals are doing great for mid-level opportunities, but anything greater than 59 million, we are actually struggling. So it's great for getting those insights as well. So I'm going to hand it over back to Anand to talk about the last remaining pattern from lift and shift, and then talk about the roadmap. Anand?
Thank you, Gaurav. That was a great demo. Okay, great. So earlier I spoke about a couple of patterns which are mainly about modern analytics solution, but we also support existing customers who have traditional analytics solution to lift and shift their SSIS, SQL Server Integration Services packages into Azure Data Factory in a fully compatible manner. We are hearing this feedback from a lot of customers that they have built thousands of SSIS packages over decades. Now they do not have the team that build those packages. So we enable those customers to easily lift and shift those packages into ADF. And once the packages are lifted and shifted, newer workloads can start following one of the modern analytics pattern that I mentioned. We also support all the third-party components on SSIS packages and the partner ecosystem that SSIS has built over time. Now, in terms of the roadmap, as I mentioned earlier, we have built a lot of capabilities in the last 12 months, and we are continuing to invest heavily on Azure Data Factory across various components that we discussed: code-free transformations, experiences, enterprise readiness in terms of VNet support, orchestration, monitoring management, and so forth. Just to recap now, ADF is an industry-leading cloud-native data integration platform offering ETL and ELT capabilities. It provides the best price performance for you. We have heard your feedback, evolve the platform, continue to mature it, and listen to the feedback that we are hearing from our customers, from partners, from field, and bringing all these capabilities that you guys love into the product. Thank you. I don't have time for Q&A right now, but we are also at the booth at the hub. You can stop by there to talk about the product. We can answer your questions. We are going to hang out here a little bit to answer any pressing questions that you may have now.